right, good morning everybody. Welcome to another Project O Facebook Live. It's Marissa, Kyle, and Captain Ian here today from Smith Cove. So we're gonna start off with Captain Ian telling us a little bit about where we are. And then we're gonna talk to you about what we're gonna be doing today.
Okay, good morning everyone. So we are in Smith Cove. We're in the Quaker Hill section of Waterford. So this cove, just we know it's Bull's Cove many years ago, now it's Smith Cove. If you look off to Up Cove, around the corner, okay, that's where Hunt's Brook feeds in. That's our freshwater source. It comes in from a body of water called Miller Pond over farther inland. And then if we pan over to the bridge, that's Route 32 right there. If you go out underneath that bridge, you're in the outer cove. If you travel a little farther and go under the train trestle, you'll be out in the Thames River. So we're approximately 5 or 6 miles upriver on the western side, right across from the Naval Submarine Base, if you know where that is. That's approximately where we are right now. So this is, again, for freshwater and saltwater meet in this cove right here.
Perfect. So what we're going to be doing today, we're going to be looking at some of the different organisms that call this cove home. So I want you guys to take a guess. What do you think might live in this environment? Like Captain Ian said, it is connected to the Thames River and therefore connected to Long Island Sound. He's going to tell us a little later some of the cool things that he's seen in this cove since he's lived here. But we're going to be using a minnow trap today, and Kyle's going to pull that up in just a minute. But what type of things do you think we're going to find in that minnow trap? So go ahead and put in your comments what you think we're going to find, as well as putting in where you're watching from and any schools you're affiliated with. All right, Kyle.
So on our previous Facebook Lives, we were doing a few different other sampling methods. This one is a little bit easier for us. We don't have to bring our waders and big seine nets or anything like that. We can just kind of bait a trap, leave it out there, and see who decides to find their way into it. So this is the minnow trap here. You can see there's already a bunch of algae and biofilm on there. And yeah, we have lots of animals in there. So I'm just going to give them a quick dip, and then I'll open up this trap and see what we have in here.
All right, so while you're doing that, I want to go through some predictions. So Debbie thinks there might be some juvenile fish.
Okay.
Irish thinks that maybe there are some fish and crabs might be living in the cove.
Those are all good guesses, and let me just get these all in the water and we can take a look at what we have.
So a juvenile fish, just so everybody knows, is a type of young fish. So when we catch them, that just means that they're not fully grown yet. But there are some fish that stay small their entire life. We saw some of them the last time that we were out seining at the salt pond. So I'm interested to see if we're going to see some of the same species or if we're going to find some new species today.
Alright, so we did get a decent amount of diversity here. I'm going to take a, you know what, actually I'm just going to pop them all in here so we can get a better
There's a
better
net there
look.
too, Kyle, if you need it.
What's that?
So there's a dip net too.
Alright. So they are varying sizes, varying species.
Alright.
So it could be that we have some adults, some juveniles, or just bigger and smaller species of fish. We'll identify them in a second. But here we do have that tidal influence, so there is a saltwater intrusion up into the cove here. It is typically fresher than where we were sampling before, because we are further up the Thames River, and we have some direct freshwater influence here from groundwater and as well as the brook. So we're going to be looking for some saltwater tolerant species, as well as those that prefer a fresher environment. So a lot of animals that live here have to be able to tolerate both salinities of fresh and brackish or salty water. So, all right, yeah, so I do see some species that we have already seen further downriver and around the salt marsh. We have some killifish, some sticklebacks, and some grass shrimp as well. So this environment is important because we have the brooks running in here. There's a lot of eutrophication. There's lots of nutrients flooding in with that fresh water, as well as coming up from the tides. And we'll show you a little bit later, but if you actually look into the water, there's a lot of algae and also what we call biofilm, so colonies of bacteria that can feed small invertebrates as well as these smaller fish and their fry. So there's a lot of food here available for small animals. It also attracts, I don't know if you can see, but I was developing a little swarm of flying bugs behind my head. And a lot of them like to actually reproduce in this fresher water. They'll lay their eggs in here, their larvae will develop, and these fish like to eat those small insects. So let's see here.
So we have a question.
Yeah.
Hazel wants to know, Ian, what did you use as bait for your minnow trap?
Today I used a can of sardines. I put them in 2 days ago. So it's a cheap can, a little bit of oil, just leaves a scent trail and attracts bait. But I've also used squid. I've used, if I go fishing, I'll use whatever left over from cleaning the fish. Anything that will break down and attract, leave a scent trail and attract bait works well.
Okay, so we definitely want some sort of bait in there to attract them in versus just leaving it in by itself.
Yeah,
correct.
So some fish may be able to just find their way into the trap, wander into it, but you definitely want that bait there so that it's more directed. And you pop a couple of holes in that can so that the oils can leak out and attract them. They can sense that from farther away. So it looks like we have some killifish, we have some stickleback and grass shrimp. And something that we like to do when we get a catch like this to measure our sample. And for that we have these little measuring boards here. So I'll show you how we measure some of the fish and tell you about why we might want to do that. So first thing, I like to dip it in the water to get it wet. These fish have a mucus coating on their bodies to protect them from infections and things like that. So I don't want that to stick to a dry board and harm the fish. So make sure my hands and the board are wet. And
so while Kyle's doing this, you can see we actually set up a whiteboard. So we have the two main types of fish that we're gonna catch, and we have some different lengths. So while he's measuring, Captain Ian is going to be putting tally marks so we can see the range of sizes of the fish that we caught today. So this is something that we would do with any catch that we have. And if you're sampling, it's always good to get information like this on your sample.
So we take the fish and we put its nose or the snout to the 0 mark there and measure from the tip of the nose to the very tip of the tail here. So this fish here is about a little over 3.5 inches or about 9.5 centimeters it looks like for a killifish. Don't want to measure it twice, so I'm not going to put it back in the specimen tank. Alright. I'm not trying to catch you, step away. Alright. We'll do a couple more of these here. Alright, and this one is 8.75 centimeters.
Get a look at this.
And we didn't catch one of these in the seine, so I want to make sure you get a chance to look. These are stickleback here, and their bellies are full. They've been eating a lot because there is plenty of food available in this cove here. So let's see. And the sticklebacks, they don't get quite as big as the killies.
A little slippery, huh?
They also don't like to stay on the board.
A little more active.
Yeah. Alright, so these ones are coming out about 5 centimeters.
Okay. So while we continue doing this, I want to let you guys know these fish are not fish that are important for commercial or recreational fishing. So why do you think we would care about what the size range is of all these fish if we don't care about them as far as fishing purposes?
Yeah, nobody's going to be catching and eating these fish per se. They're not fun to catch for sport, and they don't have a whole lot of meat on them for food. So why do you think they're important for us to study and for this ecosystem? All right, this one is 4.5. Stickleback.
We got some stickleback lovers in the audience.
Oh yeah. Yeah, these are neat little fish. They have powerful bodies and these sharp spines along their dorsal fin, so you can see where they get their name. 4.5.
Okay. See an update on our tally so far. 2 killifish and 3 sticklebacks.
Another stickleback at another one at 4.5 centimeters. All right. So did we get any guesses as to why these fish are so ecologically or scientifically important for us?
So there was one guess that was they are indicative of how clean the environment is.
Sure.
So if they're there, the water is presumably not toxic. And then Greta thinks that little fish get eaten by big fish.
Yeah, that's very true, Greta. So these fish, even though we may not be eating them, they're an important food source for a lot of commercially important species that will also come up this river and feed on them. So they can stay in the salty water if they're strictly brackish or marine fish, but we also have a lot of different species that will spend part of their life in the salt water and then sometimes will come upriver into the freshwater to reproduce, and these are an important food source for them. So we call those fish anadromous fish. So an example of that might be the striped bass, which is an important commercial fish. Lots of people will catch those, eat them, or just catch them for sport. A lot of the young snapper blues will also come up here as well and feed on them, and wading birds. So these types of environments are really important for migratory birds or birds that live here year-round because they can wade along the shallows here and catch these fish for food as well. We saw there's some birds nesting over there also, so we have geese. We've seen egrets and herons flying around. So these fish, even though we're not going to be eating them, they feed a lot of different animals around here.
All right. So we've got a data update. 2 killifish, 4 sticklebacks.
All right.
We still got a few more to
Yeah.
go.
All right, another stickleback here at 4 centimeters. Let's see if I can just breeze through these real quick.
Sure.
Stickleback. Hopefully it will cooperate. At 4.5 centimeters.
So while we're finishing this, I'm just curious, how many of you guys have gone fishing before? And if you have, what is the coolest or the biggest fish that you have caught?
4.5.
Because we talked about a little bit how these fish can influence the population of those larger fish that we like to eat and that we like to catch. So I'm just curious what you guys have caught so we can kind of relate that.
That's 4.25.
We have a trend here.
Yeah. So these ones may seem all about the same size. Fish that are about the same size, we can guess, are about the same age as well. So an important reason that we measure these fish is to kind of determine how old they are. Obviously, juvenile fish are going to be smaller than the larger ones, so we can get a sense of how the population is succeeding in this environment. If we catch a bunch of little ones, then we can tell that they're reproducing here. If we catch only adults, then they may be reproducing somewhere else, or this environment might not be suitable for their young. And this one is 5 centimeters.
Definitely a greater size distribution in the killifish.
Yeah. So it's that looks like all the stickleback. So let's continue on with these killies.
Killies, I believe the females tend to get bigger than
Yeah, the
males,
females do get a lot larger. So that's another thing that we can kind of determine when we're measuring these. All right, and this killie is 5 centimeters, so smaller than the others so far.
All right. So while you're finishing up, I want to go through what some people have said they've caught.
Yeah.
So Debbie said she loves to go black fishing.
Okay.
And Greta said she once caught a largemouth bass.
Okay.
Very nice.
Yeah, so largemouth bass, you can, they don't really like salt water, but further up into the cove or closer to the freshwater source of this environment, you may catch some largemouth bass. The blackfish, the adults don't typically like this environment. They like salty water out in the sound with lots of rocks along the bottom. This one's 5 centimeters. However, we will find the juveniles. So this environment, like the salt marsh, is really important for juvenile fish of species that tend to get a lot larger. This is a great nursery habitat for them because there's a lot of rocks and nooks and crannies and lots of vegetation for those young fish to hide in. So even though we don't see the big ones out here, they like the larger food that's available out in the sound or the open ocean. They will come in here to reproduce, or their young will find their way up here to have a safe place to grow up. Awesome. All right, and 5 centimeters.
All right, I think we got one more fish.
One more fish.
And then we did catch a small shrimp as well. Let me try to zoom in. He's the only guy left in there.
Grass shrimp.
Yep.
So they're hiding in all of the algae that's out here right now. They love having that protection and
6 centimeters.
the food source that it brings.
Yeah.
We also have Joseph, who has caught flounder.
Oh yeah.
Those are something that we also find in Long Island Sound, and we did actually catch some juveniles last Thursday.
Yeah.
Adult flounder will be right outside the cove in the river. You would still be able to get winter flounder.
Okay, so pretty close by.
Yeah, so the bottom water around here, even though we are about 5 miles away from the saltwater source of the sound, the bottom water here does stay pretty salty. So those fish that prefer the salt water can still stay on the bottom, and that's where flatfish like to be anyway. I did also see one other cool thing in here. It looks like an amphipod, which is a kind of arthropod that is an important food source for all these fish here. I saw it swimming around somewhere, and then I just lost it. But
very tiny.
Yeah, so lots of small crustaceans and invertebrates like to live here, graze on this algae in the biofilm, and feed all these smaller animals. Oh, there it is. See if I can spook it up. There. I don't know if you can see it swimming around at the bottom there.
No, I think there's too much algae in the water.
All right, I'll try and scoop it up. So if I trick it, they like to hide in little nooks and crannies, so I just made it think that my hand was a little rock it can hide in. And they're actually really good at living in these intertidal zones because they can stay out of the water and kind of crawl along like this when they come out of the water, and then they can also swim pretty well too.
Yeah, you guys might have seen them actually if you're at the beach looking for animals and you're flipping rocks over.
Right.
So let's go back to our data real quick and just do a final tally. So for killifish, it looks like we caught 7. We had 3 that were 5 centimeters, 2 that were 6 centimeters, and then what's the last one again?
Over 7.
Okay, over 7.
Some are up as much as 9.
All right, between 7 and 9. We ran out of room on our board. And then for sticklebacks, we had a much closer range, somewhere between 4 and 5 centimeters. So what does that tell us about how old these fish are?
Well, about 4.5 to 5 centimeters is pretty much the max size for an adult stickleback, so we're not going to find them too much bigger than that. And the killifish can get considerably larger, over 7 centimeters, but we do have some younger ones as well. And also the difference between the sizes of the males and the females shows up that way as well.
Perfect. So if you are out fishing for some of those animals, like the blackfish or the fluke or even the bass, there are also regulations on the sizes of those fish you can catch, right?
Yeah.
So my question to the audience, why do you think there are size regulations on some of those larger species that we do like to catch? And what would happen if we caught fish that are smaller than the legal limit to catch them? So that is my guess to you. While we're waiting for your responses, I'd love to know, Captain Ian,
Yes.
what are some cool things that you have seen that are using this cove as home?
One of the interesting things about the cove is there's definitely seasonal variations. In the wintertime, a lot of ducks would like to spend time in here because the water doesn't tend to freeze. So ducks like open water. So not only do we get the marine ducks like the oders, scoters, and old squaws, we get mallards. I've seen mallards as little as a couple days ago. Canada geese. There's actually a mama goose in that tall growth over there on her nest. You can't see her, but she's in there. That's the second year in a row. There's been a clutch of Canada geese there. Later on in the summer, we'll start getting the wading birds that Kyle mentioned, the egrets and the blue herons. So those are cool. We have eastern diamondback terrapins in here. So there are some turtles that like to live in here. Blue crabs become common later on in the summer. The snapper blues do come in here right around July. I have seen and caught some smaller striped bass in here. I'm sure there's some bigger ones from time to time. In March, we had a bald eagle in the big tree over by my neighbor's house, so that was pretty cool to see an eagle. And then one of the coolest things I saw about 2 springs ago, a gray seal actually came in here. I happened to be looking out and I saw the big head come up and it cruised past around the corner, and then a few minutes later I saw it cruise back and out, and that was it. But that was probably the most unusual animal I've seen in here so far in 3 years.
Wow. Why do you think, what is your guess as to why it was in here?
I would imagine looking for a meal. It was late spring. Very unusual for a gray seal to be here. We've seen seals all the way up into Norwich Harbor. As their population continues to increase, they seem to be more common. I would have not expected that species, but it certainly had the big long nose of a gray seal, and it made itself comfortable. A nice slow cruise up the cove and right back out.
Awesome. So we did have a few guesses that if we take them, those fish, before they reproduce, then they'll deplete the population.
Yeah, if we catch and keep the fish before they reach their adult size, which is usually the basis for those regulations, then they won't have a chance to reproduce and replace themselves in the wild population. So eventually there will be no young to grow up into fish that we can catch and eat. So it's really important that we adhere to those regulations and protect the wild populations of these animals so that they can continue to thrive in this environment.
Perfect. All right, so thank you guys for tuning in to our Facebook Live today. We look forward to seeing you guys. Let's get us all in there. We look forward to seeing you guys again next week for our Facebook Lives on Thursday and Tuesday at 9:30. And thank you guys all for watching, and have a good weekend.
All right,
Bye, everybody.
Take care.